How about you?
You want to come up here,
I'm good right
or?
now, I can move back there, fine.
I'm good.
So it's 1 o'clock, I call this meeting part of ad hoc construction committee. So the first order of business is to elect a chair. I nominate John Caleb.
Second.
Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Mr. Caleb?
Next form of business is number 3, to elect the vice chair. Any nominations for the vice chair? Nomination for Mr. Kudo. Is there any other nomination? Any other nomination? Any other nominations for vice chair? If none being heard, Mr. Kudo, vice chair.
The motion to cast unanimous ballot.
Anonymous motion to cast.
Cast
Anonymous
unanimous
ballot
ballot.
for Tom Kudo.
I'll move. Second.
First by Mr. Moore, second by Mr. Coggins, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Alright, now you're officially the vice chair.
Thank you.
I can do that. So do I have to do that, so you're officially chair?
I would.
Well, we probably should run that through to,
What did you say?
ask her.
There you go. There you go. Cast unanimous ballot for,
I'll do that, I moved to cast unanimous ballot for John Caleb for chairman.
I'll second it.
I'll second it. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, there we go. Approval of the February 21st, 2024 minutes. That's our last meeting. Motion to approve February 21st.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Kudo.
Second.
These guys would say it, but they weren't here. But
Second.
Second by Mr. Edwards. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. Discussion possible motion, review the jail project progress by Venture Architects and Samuels Group.
Alright, good afternoon, everyone. So, Kyle is here, for those of you that don't know Kyle's with Venture. Corey couldn't be here today. And, obviously we know that we had our communications plan and then we had some subsequent, committee meetings. And, the committee meetings obviously came back to, let's start over, let's look at a different location, let's look at different options based on the feedback they get from the community. So we're fully prepared to do that, whatever you guys wanna do in regards to starting over or changes that you wanna make. But I thought it would be good for those of you that weren't on the committee for us to take, I think we can probably cut this covered in 15 minutes or so, that we won't bore you too long. Just to go through the process of how we got to where we are. And you've seen the pretty pictures, there's some legwork before that I think would be good for us to walk through with you. So Wald had done an initial master planning study for Utah County and had identified the jail and the highway shop. And from the jail perspective, they ended with, we need to confirm the space program, okay? And so what Venture did, and that's really looking at the spaces that are needed. How big the space needs to be, how do we qualify all of those elements? And I thought it'd be good for Kyle to go through and kind of compare and contrast the space program, and then we'll get into how we got to the concepts. Because the process is, get your space program nailed down, identify the square footage, and then start with some floor plans and some layouts. So I've had Kyle put some spreadsheets here together so that we can speak to the comparisons that are there.
I'll take one.
Oh.
I passed mine back.
We're all confused. That's, okay.
So this is, a portion of the space program that will be put together on the original master plan. This is specific to the jail portion of things. So part of our responsibility in coming in was to validate what this program was, and in talking through with the sheriff, one of the things that we now understand is when this was put together, Wolf did not confer with the sheriff's office really on any of these spaces. They really just looked at the existing spaces that were here and then just put numbers to it, and it looks like by our assumption there were no plans that we could reference or anything. So by looking at that, it looks like they may have just expanded some of these a little bit just to have some growth potential in there. So in going through here, what we've identified, doing the best kind of forensics investigation we could do here is there are 2 dorm areas on page 2 that it's listed as existing area that is not part of the program area. So using that, we're assuming that dorm 1 and dorm 2 would be cleared out for renovation. And then there were another series of other dorms and blocks that go up to page 3, which goes up to F block. These are all existing. If it's in the existing column and the program column, those are all what is currently up on the 2nd floor for the jail. Okay, so that goes from dorm 3 to block F, and then they add G block, H block, and I block. Now, the one thing with all of those that we have identified as part of the concern that we have is if we go back to page 3, for dorm 3 and dorm 4, the area that they're calling for the dormitories are not compliant with the DOC 350 statutes that have minimum square footage requirements. So these are just, when we're going through to do a validation of a program, these are the kind of things that we do. So we looked at that, the 410 square feet and the 270 square feet were not adequate. That should be 560 and 280 respectively. And then as we went through for some of the other spaces, we recognized that for G block, H block, and I block, that the day rooms were adequate and the cell size was adequate. But one of the things we do look at for us is, as an industry, I'll say a best practice, we typically have double cells be about 80 square feet. And part of that is, and not that the 70 square feet, that does meet the DOC minimum size, and for some odd reason, the state allows for a smaller square footage for double bed cells than a single bed cell. So, and that's unencumbered square feet. So the 70 square feet reflects that. We usually use 80 square feet. A big part of that is just because when you have 2 inmates in a cell and you have 2 correctional officers coming in to help somebody, 70 square feet is really tight, and that is a safety risk for both correctional officers and for the inmates. So we tend to go to 80 square feet, so we had just identified that as being somewhat deficient to what a typical industry best practice is. So with that, we took that, looked at what some of the deficiencies were in the WOLD program. We met with the sheriff, met with the jail administrator, met with all of the staff, came through and identified what some of the needs were. One of the other things lacking in this WOLD study was there was no kitchen proposed in here. So what is being sort of presented as a $25 million jail is a jail like is currently relying on the Lady Smith Family Restaurant for a kitchen and a somewhat undersized laundry facility. Some spaces are a little bit tight, so just to sort of ground everything from a $25 million cost that was associated with this as being not terribly sufficient to then finding out and meeting with the users to get to a number that was there. We do have those programs. And this is actually probably revision 3 or 4 of this program. We've gone through, we've worked with the original ad hoc committee to right-size the space even more. Typically we start off with an assessment as to how many beds are needed. From that point, we start laying everything out, have kitchen, have laundry, have a sally port. The other part with this report is that it's working under the assumption that it would be using the existing sally port with that. So providing a new, more secure sally port with the program that's here. So that is where we got to where we are. Now, what we can show is the layout that we have currently.
Essentially, they get you the massing and the square footage needed to support what needs to happen in the jail, and now they go into the floor plans. So they'll take this square footage here, and that's how we got to the layouts that he's gonna be sharing with you.
So I think before we even look at this, one thing that we should mention is prior to making a formal presentation to the former ad hoc committee, I'll say the core team of the Samuels Group, Venture Architects, and all key stakeholders in the sheriff's office looked at a number of different options. We looked at the west parking lot, we looked at the existing block, we looked south, just what properties are adjacent, what makes the most sense with all of that. So we had looked at those, brought that to the ad hoc committee. The ad hoc committee challenged our team. Hey, can we look at this? Have you thought about this? And I just, for that part of that, I do feel that we should just kind of review some of the pieces, and we have it presented up here right now. What we looked at was, what if we renovate the existing space? It's a fair question. The building seems to be in fair condition. Let's take a look at that. The issue with any renovation of existing space, once you start exceeding renovating over 50% of the area, you now, due to international existing building code, have to bring everything up to code, essentially. And part of that being the DOC 350. So now the spaces that are currently grandfathered in, the size requirements grandfathered in for the jail cells, for the day rooms, now have to be compliant with current day standards, which what that means is if you renovate any of the jail cells in the existing space, you actually lose space because you need to have more clear floor area for day rooms for the cells. So in looking at that, the areas where there is housing in the existing space are identified here in red or pink, depending on how the resolution is. Areas that can't be remodeled, so that would be a dispatch, stairwells, those are the areas in green. And then areas to be remodeled for program and rec is the purple area there, and that's where the laundry is and the current rec space. It's a fairly limited footprint that would be needed for that. So, and it still is, it's this linear design. One of the things that for safety and for staffing, really the better approach is to go with a more of a pod, which is, think of a donut, and in the center of it would be your master control. You can have views at every angle. When you're looking down the hallway, you can't really see laterally in. So there's some benefits to having that pod design because you have fewer staff. You need more people to be viewing all of the cells, the inmates, and the pods when you have it in a linear fashion. So really exhausted the ability to expand any kind of bed space in the existing space, so then we started looking at other alternatives. This is the option where I'm sure you're all aware of, which was building to the south on the county-owned property of the parking lot, having the jail go over minor and attaching to the building. Word on the street, especially minor, that's not a popular option, which we understand. We looked at going to the east side and using that existing parking lot. This was another idea that came out of the ad hoc committee. This going with the size of the jail pod, which is kind of that donut shape, the service piece, the support piece to the jail, that's to the north. That would require closing down 4th Street. We looked at trying to keep it all on the block, not shutting down a street. So then that would take out the most recent addition to the government center and have to relocate the radio tower. That actually had a reduced bed count, so that was not a popular option. Again, readjusting everything, trying to use every square footage of the parking lot. This took the north addition. That really didn't work because now we're having to relocate everybody in either of those buildings. This is a 2-story option. So what if we had support on one floor and then stacked everything up above? There again, the critical part here is getting that jail that has a secure corridor or secure passage to the courts. This would allow that, but now we're still having to close down part of 4th Street. I'm trying to think which one was this. This was I believe that was a 2-story option as well, where we would do pretty radical renovation of the second floor.
It's actually a 3-story option.
This is the 3-story option. Just really trying to not go on any street and keep everything vertical here. Again, radically including a lot of renovation within the existing government center. This was a reduced, this is raising both the south and the loading dock building to get this pod to work. That was a 2-story option. And then there was the option of what if we move everything south, don't close down minor, and get access to the courts via a skywalk. That's how we got here. We're open for other insights, if there are other insights.
You wouldn't mind bringing up that page I showed you about the cost, the construction cost index?
I certainly can.
So one of the things that's key while we're going through and putting these options together is really to start identifying what's the cost of the project, right? And so we track what happens on that correctional, this is correctional square footage cost. So we went back 15 years just to kind of show you what happened. You can kind of see the chart in the items that happened there. So you'll see that it was kind of a consistent increase from 2009 up until 2021. What happened over the years of 22, 23, and into 24 is you can see the cost of this correctional square footage that's there. The reason that I wanted to show this to you is right now at your $38.5 million option, we were budgeting your square footage at $825 a square foot to plug that into what that inflation, if that inflation index stays the way it is, if you built in 24, we carried it at $825 a square foot. So the way this works is these are hard bid numbers. They're competitively publicly bid numbers that we track on projects that we've done all throughout the Midwest. So we can have an indicator of what's happening with the market. And what happened in 22 and 23 is it just took a significant jump. It affected many projects that we were working on, many projects other contractors are working on. And right now, we actually had another one that just bid out last month, and that trajectory is is accurate. It's not leveling off, it's not coming down, it's still trending up. So as we move forward with changes and how do we revisit or start over, the reason that I wanted to show you this is if we want to see a reduction in cost, we have to significantly reduce the size of the building. Meaning that we have to change what that program is that was identified here. And if that's, are we only going to build housing? And where is that housing gonna go? Are we going to reuse Sallyport? What are we gonna do with those options? Because this construction index or this cost index is something that we have to be able to look at in regards to how much building are we gonna get for what the budget is. So I've heard the $25 million number, I've heard other numbers, keep it under 30 million. I understand that we need to keep this thing reduced and we need to reduce it cost-wise. That's what, as an ad hoc committee here, we would like some guidance and direction on where do we want to cut? Do we want to reduce beds? Do we want to remove all of the support space and reuse old space? I've also heard at those committee meetings that there's some members that don't think it's wise to build downtown here or invest into this campus to look at another campus. If you wanted us to look at another campus and just do a small portion of the jail at a different campus, we are open to any and all of those options. We can come back to this program. If you said, hey, let's just look at doing housing, what does that do to operations? We're gonna have to figure out what do we do with intake, where do we put it? But that's a real quick summary of how we got to where we are. The confirmation of the square footage caused an increase in square footage from what we saw in the wall study, and then the cost associated with the construction of correctional being an impact over the last 3 years has also had an increase in regards to what you had before you was undeliverable. So,
and with that, so what we have up on the screen is really a graphic representation of kind of doing all of the math and the layout and the planning for the 11 by 17 program that's there, okay? So just for a point of reference relative to that program and then going back to the original WOLD program, and when we think of to what Kirk was saying relative to that delta between the 38 million and the 25 million, so just for that point of reference, if the image on the left-hand side, this would be ground floor. What was not included in this study would be this mint green area, which is the Sallyport. This plan was reutilizing the garage here for that. This big, large purple box, that's the kitchen area, all service associated with the kitchen. The big sort of upside down Virginia shaped, red shape there, that's the booking area and receiving cells. Currently there you have, I'll say 2 with a potential third that's there. And that's just not adequate at all for the amount of times, because the receiving cells are sometimes used as a disciplinary piece to get an agitated person out of the general population, out of a pod, out of a cell, and you can put them into the receiving cells. When you have 2 receiving cells, you just can't do that. So this has the number of cells that are receiving cells that were required. If we zoom in here down in the lower left corner, there's the magenta and the orange area. That is a secure vestibule for vendor entry. So with the kitchen, with the laundry, you might have any non-jail staff related people, non-deputized people who are coming in working on that. That's their kind of entry to come through, and the intent there is if at ever one point, if security measures had to get heightened, the sheriff and the jail administrator would be able to bring their vendors in through the pre-book area, be able to go through the body scanner just for contraband or anything, and then be able to go to the job. Having that ability for, I'll say, scalable security that you're looking at. The other piece here, the orange area, that's a Huber entry. Currently that program is not in place here. The facilities aren't really there to be able to do that. So there is a secure Huber entry that's here just as another means of being able to reintegrate inmates into society while they're serving time. The other part that we can look at as well on the upper level is this sort of light blue area that is the medical office. There was one room that was in the Wolf study. It was really just, they call it medical office, but it's 120 square feet. It's the size of an exam room that you go to at a clinic. Really, that needs to have the exam room, a nurse's office, and the medication stored between 3 layers of security. So that's what you're seeing here in that light blue area. Only that was included in this was just one exam room. And jail, I believe the jail administrative area as well, the dark blue. So these are offices for the jail captain, conference room, administrative offices, jail lieutenant. None of that was included in here. So just so you can begin to see that there are a number of pieces on this plan as it was laid out that really never were a part of this. And as Kurt is saying, as that number for construction on correctional goes up, every little square foot that you add to that just increases that cost. The other piece that I can quickly cover here is the big brown area up on top, brown or red over orange. I guess it's orange if I look at that. That's the main jail pod. That piece that is cut out in the upper right-hand part is for future expansion. So what we're showing currently in that configuration would be a jail that would have 62 beds without doing any other construction. You could double bunk certain cells and that could take the population to 70. And then that future expansion space in the northeast corner could be built, and that would be able to increase the bed count by 17 additional beds. And that construction, the way we were working it through with the Samuels group, is that construction literally could happen without disrupting any activity in the jail. As you can see, it's kind of independent of that, and then you would just be right at the final part after the commissioning of the building, you'd be able to make breaks through those panels and be able to have those cells integrated into the pod. So we really tried to work with the committee, understanding a lot of the items we heard from the ad hoc committee, a lot of the items that we heard during the public listening sessions, and then understanding changing the bed count again, trying to lower that square footage to try to bring the costs down, but then recognizing, hey, that just is not putting the county in a good position for the future. This really became the sweet spot of both bed count and building size.
So that's kind of our summary. I guess we are open to any direction on starting over, reducing, new sites, things like that. So, or did we cover too much? Do you have questions on anything that we covered? John, you're new to this.
Right,
You're new to
right
this.
now, is this all new construction right here?
Correct.
This one?
This would be across the street
Yeah.
with new construction. Correct. Now, the thing about the new construction is that when that's built over there in the Skywalk connector, the new construction square footage, when you look at that cost index that's there, now we're talking about the new construction. When we start to get into those renovation pieces, now we gotta start to talk about operational components and how do we work this. So this could be built outside, not affecting any of your operations, and make the tie with the Skywalk after we move them over. So, but yes, this is shown all new.
And to that point, one other item, and this came up multiple times in the public sessions, was, and if I can go to we have it here, I don't know. Master planning. You know, why would we put it there, or can't we put it on the existing site? If I go to here, some of these options where we were looking at developing items all on this site without going off, closing a street down. One of the really major issues with that is that it really limits any kind of future expansion on this block for this campus, whether that be courts, administrative, anything like that. It is, you're landlocked by your own growth. So the idea utilizing the lot to the south, which the county owns, provided the ability to, when I look at this, it allows for, as Kurt said, that jail to be built without affecting any operations, and then looking to the future of potentially acquiring these properties to then do future growth and building a new government center on the east side of that entire
Do you
plot.
have the drawing that shows that?
I don't think I do, and I am very frustrated that I don't have it.
Essentially, all the services that are on this campus fit on that campus, and without displacing any of the streets around there.
And then at that point, then, that connection, the skywalk connection, that could be severed, because then the courts would be on the east side. And the plan that we were showing there is set up such that then all activity for inmate transportation can go directly to the east as opposed to going directly to the north.
Well, there's no doubt that's the ideal plan. I mean, it certainly is, built all new and away from everything, but it still doesn't bring that price tag down that I see. I mean, are we gonna have to work with what we have here
Well, and I
to
think
make
that,
it fly?
and I think that's part of what we got from the community feedback. What we heard at a couple of the board meetings is that the number is too large, and that's what we're here today to say. If that means we're gonna work within the parameters of this building, right? What constraints or what limitations do we wanna see? Do we wanna focus on, just the housing unit, and just only address housing, even though we know we're not addressing multiple other things that are there? How do we step into that? I guess one other thing that I would offer is I heard the need for the highway shop was up there, right? And I would offer that if you want us to help with the master planning of looking at, cause we just got done finishing a highway shop for another county, we could put together what does that highway shop look like with the projection of cost, cause you heard the financial side that said in 8 to 10 years, you're gonna be in a position to do that, so that the board could feel comfortable about how do you strategize to get to that. We're here to give you those sorts of things, if that's where you wanna look to get to that point. If it's, we're gonna reinvest in this old structure, right, and if that means we're gonna put it in that parking lot, if we're gonna put it in the parking lot and we're only gonna put housing there, and that part of what we were dealing with of getting the number down was, we had to stay focused on a program, right? So we were gonna keep bed count, we were gonna keep jail support, we were gonna keep intake, all so that we could have flow there. If we're just talking about a housing unit, then where are we gonna park it, and how are we gonna deal with the operational piece? So, this is Kyle's, this is a representation of if it all fits on that one.
Yeah, this is just a massing of, the jail is in that upper left corner, and then everything kind of in the foreground, the two squares there, the 3-story and the 2-story, that would be the full government center of everything on this block, then moving to the south, and programmatically what that would look like in a size.
So this would be your 25, 30-year master plan, that replacement of the courthouse at year 20 or 25, now the campus that's to the north becomes your parking lot, so you basically just flopped them, right? You want new building and made a parking lot.
It's addressing the question that we heard from many constituents of, well, you know, what is this, where do we go in the future now? Are we preventing any kind of?
I think one other thing that we got a lot of feedback on was the location of the jail in that spot with the neighbors.
Yeah,
It means
right.
that the jail should go outside of or on the edge of town, and there's a lot that you want us to look at. If there's property that you want us to evaluate, I'm got counties that are considering acquiring private property to address that situation, and that could be something we work with you on to figure out what that solution is. But it's really, what is that next step in regards to, you wanna reduce? Do you wanna reduce the scope? Do you wanna take steps to get to this phase, like just a piece at a time? What kind of direction are you thinking?
Yeah, our job here is to help this committee answer those tough questions and come up with all of the information that you need to make those informed decisions. We want to help you in any way we can with any of those questions that you have.
Do we know the square footage of the court system?
Up there. Yes. Give me one moment to try and dig that up.
In conjunction with that, also, our law enforcement center as well. And is it in an ideal situation to consider the law enforcement center and the judicial part of it, the court system, to be together with the jail?
If,
In other words, we would be putting,
That's the ultimate model, right?
okay,
It's just a matter of how expensive it is to get there,
yeah,
and what steps do you wanna get to get there, and I think that's kind of what we're saying, is if that's your long-range plan, to find a spot for that, if it's not downtown, we can figure out what is that first step.
that's what I'd like to know, like roughly, for those two entities, the court system and the law enforcement center, how many square feet do we need for those two? Not including the jail.
Well, based off of this, 89,000 square feet for the sheriff's department.
Did you say 89,000?
No, those are combined numbers, Jeff.
Well, that is, so it'd be 58,000.
Yeah, I think what he's looking at, that's probably the entire, justice center.
Oh,
Okay, I was looking at what's up there.
Okay, so circuit courts currently, we had programmed 1,300, roughly 1,300 square feet. And this is just for inmate holding. Non-jury courtroom would be out there, that's roughly 2,500 square feet. Future courtroom would not be a part of that. Why we did not add that up, but we've got roughly 3,500, maybe 4,000 square feet for your existing courtroom. You know what? This is,
Roughly about 7,800 so far.
let me,
While you're doing that, Tom, is your question related to how big would the justice center be if we put it all on campus? Is that really what you were looking for?
We're kind of looking for it, yeah, but wondering is, I guess I have a number in mind, square footage of 90,000 square foot. Is that adequate for those two departments?
19,000 for sheriffs and courts?
Yes, sir.
Sheriff and courts for
Sheriff.
19,000.
Sheriff and the courts. Not including the jail.
And then how you got that number in mind?
Sure.
Just a number?
You can ask me.
how much?
Whether you tell me would be a different story.
We have a vacant building that we own that's 19,000 square feet.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Okay. The PDF did not have it all added up. So this would be yep, 36,159 for courts.
When you say courts,
That's including district attorney, okay? That's including your clerk of courts, and it's including child support.
jury assembly.
And jury assembly, the judicial suite, inmate holding, non-jury courtroom. This is actually including a second courtroom, so, you could say 31,000 if you just went with the single courtroom and then the non-jury courtroom. But this plan had baked into it a potential second, branch added into it.
That's just the court system itself, that
It's
doesn't.
just the courts.
That doesn't include law enforcement.
Law enforcement, 49,192.
That includes the garage, so.
And that includes separate dispatch, or that would be, pulling dispatch up from master control. So you'd have segregated dispatch and jail control. That also,
Does that include the jail?
no,
How many?
49,000,
For just law enforcement?
law enforcement, correct.
There's a garage in there too.
Yes, so that's just it,
What do we, and that's what we have now?
no,
49,000?
this is what we
That
were.
area right over there is 49,000 square feet?
No, no, this is what, when we went through the programming process of what a new, if you were to build a new law enforcement center, that's what the recommendation would be.
But we also had a vehicle garage in there too, so that's the big square footage. I guess the point is if your question is, could the sheriff's office and the courts fit in an existing building of 19,000 square feet? That's the exercise we're prepared to work with you on. Cause then we would have to look at the square footage, look at the program and say, what are we gonna give up to fit there, right? And then I think the next question would be is if that's the case, and we wanna have it on one campus, is there space there to put a jail there, and how big is the jail when we put it there? That's kind of that's the feedback we're looking for. If that's an idea you have, we're prepared to look at it and identify. He would come back with a program and say, here's what we'd have to give up to fit in there. How painful is that?
Okay, so our current law enforcement center here is within state parameters, correct? I mean, we're not.
Sheriff's office, you mean?
Yes, thank you. We're not out of compliance with anything there, correct?
That I'm aware of. No.
Okay, so right now, do you know roughly what we have there? 8,100? Okay, just right in that area.
That might include Sallyport. I'm not sure.
That might include Sallyport, but what that may not include is the,
It doesn't include
the
the LED.
garage.
Evidence storage.
Gates, yeah, the evidence building, so part of what's in that 49,000 is also
Evidence storage.
21,000 square feet of evidence, which part of that is off-site right now. So that's vehicular evidence, everything out at the Gates building is kind of, that 49,000 square foot number is presuming that that would go away at the Gates building and it would be built into a new space. Now, to Kurt's point, we can start deselecting, for the lack of, deselecting cells to get that square footage down, to get it to that square footage that you need. If the Gates building is appropriate for evidence, that can stay there and we can take that out of the calculation here.
So if basically for the sheriff's department, if what we have right here is adequate, it's in compliance. And there's evidence storage, which is in another building, we're still looking at 8,100 square foot roughly.
Right, I guess that's what we're saying. If we're gonna replace it and the square footage is adequate, we can run with that as a premise to say, have it fit within the parameters of what you have there.
Okay, so then that leaves us, I mean, roughly maybe 11,000 square foot for the courts. Is anything upstairs out of compliance as far as the court is concerned? What?
The inmate holding area is not in compliance,
Okay,
so
how many, and what is, do you know what our current square footage for the courts is now?
Yes, I'm just looking at, how our cost allocation plan is allocated out. So courts judicial is 4,660, that does not include clerk of court. so that's, I think, be like the judges' chambers and the 2 courtrooms.
4,000 and,
660, and that might include some of those smaller conference rooms too.
okay.
So the element we'd have to look at is, do we put in 2 courtrooms, judges support space, EA, all those elements, so we would have to go through this, we would go through the programming exercise of what you're talking about.
Well, we currently have 2 courtrooms, do we not?
Correct.
Are they both used?
Yes.
And that is included, those 2 courtrooms are included in that 4660 square foot, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
That's still, so. 13, that still leaves us roughly 6,000 square foot.
We don't have the DA in there, we would need to confirm what spaces you would want in that building.
Yeah, so if I take what we have up here for, we'll call it judicial, and these grade cells is all we're calculating, so that would be public area outside of the courtroom, the judicial suite, so you'd have the judge's chambers and court reporter, 1 courtroom, a second non-jury courtroom, similar to what you have now, and inmate holding. Based off of what our recommendation is, that's 16,366 square feet. So this would be bare bones, no DA, no clerk of courts, no child support. Part of what that 36,000 number had was a second jury court plus 4,000 square feet of shelled space for additional growth as well. So I'll say there is some growth that is in these original numbers, and this, what I'm going off of right here is our original program, the first version of it that we produced after meeting with all users with Rusk County. So 16,000 square feet would be what we would recommend to start with, that bare minimum to match what you have currently.
See, the thing of this is that you're almost presenting to us that you estimate that our criminal rate is gonna rise astronomically. And I'm not sure that is gonna happen, I really am not, me personally, I can't, this is my personal take on this. The other thing is that, your proposals they're amazing, they're awesome, don't get me wrong there, but I'm not sure that you are actually looking at this county, the population, and what actually people can actually afford here. Seriously, sometimes I just don't think that you've taken that into consideration.
So Tom, that's really what we're talking about, is where do we want to make those reductions,
So what I'm saying is that we have a building that's 19,000 square foot.
Okay.
So suppose that we, if we worked with that.
what do you want to go into that building? That's what we
Well,
need.
I'd like to see if we can move our 2 courtrooms to the judge, whatever else is needed, for as far as the court system goes, and possibly get our sheriff's department over there as well.
Okay.
Use that 19,000 square foot for those 2 entities. That's gonna get the courts and the sheriff together. And then, there's room there, or we can put up a jail.
There is space there, square.
Oh my God, yes.
Okay. Then we're open to looking at that, absolutely.
I don't know, anybody else got any ideas or input here?
I think the strategy that you would have there is that if that existing building supports those 2 departments, that's your long-range plan, right? That you could get to that campus, but you wouldn't need to do it day 1. If your jail is in need to be replaced, that's your long-range plan to build it there with the vision that you're going to renovate the space for the courts. We could look at the number right now to do it all at one time, but we're growing scope from what we were. We'll have to be prepared that it's gonna be a bigger number, But the strategy would be it's a long-term solution. That's
What needs to happen, Kurt, is that we need to work these two together. Now, the existing building there is 19,000 square foot. Essentially, I believe, the interior of that building, the changes there are basically gonna be cosmetic, because you're gonna have to make partitions in there that are different than what's there.
Okay.
But everything else is there.
Sure. Well, I don't know the building down, so we're open to exploring it, taking a look.
So I
at
think
it.
we need to take a look at that, possibly tour it. I know Terry is not for this, but, this is what I think we need to look at right now, because I don't know how anybody else feels, but I don't like the jail across the street. We're displacing a business. There are people there that live there that don't want it. They made their concerns vocal at a meeting. And, not only that, I think that catwalk is a waste of money.
Okay.
That's a lot of money for that, I mean, for this county.
What,
And
and
again, we need to think about not this fabulous jail and all the blah, 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 everything, all that. What we need to think about is what this county and the people in this county can actually afford. And with that in consideration, we also have to look at, which you brought up before, is that our county highway shop is in way worse shape than this building, actually. And that's another consideration that we have, which is gonna put another tax burden on the citizens here, so. And that's long overdue for that.
And that's what I heard at finance, is that there
And
was
the
a concern-
equipment,
there was a
our
concern about-
equipment is bad. We need to.
So I think, big picture would be, if you have this campus, you want us to explore it, we'll take a look at what those options are. I would, side by side with that, I would recommend we do the same thing with highway about what does that look like to get you to year 8 or 10? Or if you guys at a point say, the highway is more important than jail while we're going through this, what does that pain look like to delay the jail? You know, that's yours, I'm gonna be a big fan of that. But this is collectively everything that I heard at those finance and board meetings, right? The only way you're going to get the board members to feel comfortable with a decision is if we look at all of them. And I think that's been effective to get that kind of dialogue from people, so now we know what their concerns are. Let's explore all of them and put numbers to it, and then we'll say, if you do this in 25, you do this in 26, and then you wait 10 years, what's gonna wait? And that way you're making those decisions, because we know that number at 38 is higher than what the community wants to support, so what is that first step? How do we figure out what that long-range plan looks like?
30
And-
million's way too much.
What's that?
40 million's way too
Oh,
much.
understood, I understand that.
I mean, weren't you guys set within a budget of 25 million to start with?
That's what I asked.
Actually, our contract says 28 million, and the 28 million was based off of the Wald study. You were exactly correct. And as we went through, that's why I showed the premise of where the confirmation of the program was, right? And how it grew, and also, John, what happened with the markets, right? It's gonna sound like an excuse, it's not, it's actually a fact, but it's something we're all in together, balancing what do we do. So for the same amount of money that we could have done something in 21, we're gonna do half of the construction that we are gonna do in 24. It's just it's the issue we have before us. So in order to keep the number down, we gotta bring this building down. And the strategy, right, of you guys say, like, if I said to the sheriff right now, we got 40 people in custody, or 35 people in custody right now, and you say, we don't need to build anything any bigger than that, then if Rusk County makes a decision to build a jail at 40 beds, because that's the cost that's there, have the strategy of how do you grow. Kyle showed you the model of we put one quadrant in there. If you say, let's put half the quadrant in there, get the number down, so at least you have a strategy to build it in the future, so you're not hamstrung. But that's the sort of thing that we've gotta get to, because I think we heard the community, right? We heard what they were saying in regards to what the costs are, get the number down, but we gotta show them how low can you go before it doesn't make sense to do so, right? I think taking all of that is in consideration, right? highway's gotta be in the mix. When you talk about courts and everything tied into that, we've gotta figure, I don't know what building you're talking about, but if we tour it, if we get some floor plans, we can absolutely do some layouts and program reduction here. We'd like us to.
And I think one thing that needs to be said is we're not trying to bamboozle Rusk County in any way here. We want to right size the elements you need and to help you solve that problem. We would be absolute fools coming in here and saying, hey, we can give this to you, and later finding out, hey, why didn't we have a kitchen in our jail? Nobody told us we didn't have a kitchen. We can't do that. We're going to come in and we're going to present to you what your needs are. This is like building a county budget. It's like building a personal budget. You have everything there, and then you start having to pick it apart and go down to what it is. This is going to be an iterative process that we're all going to be a part of to understand and have buy-in by everybody and have consensus to say, okay, this is the right jail for what we need. The sheriff is okay with it. The board has agreed with it. The constituency is understanding it as well. But if we were to come in and just say, well, we'll give you this for 28 million, but you're not going to have a sally port, it's actually going to be a fenced-in area over here. You're not going to have a kitchen, it's going to be a Weber grill. We can't do that as professionals. We need to provide you everything we need to provide you with the information so you know everything you need.
And to that point is that it's gonna be a 2.5 to 3 year build. We wanna make sure that we're all aware that when you occupy it, that it's able to meet your needs. That's why when we talk about bed count and all those elements, we're gonna wanna talk about what is that right size, right? Cause you'd hate to invest in money in it and realize that it's not the right size. But I think that's where we're at. How painful are we gonna make the cuts to get the numbers down? And I feel that's the exercise in where we are in this process. And we're willing to hear, it sounds like we've got an option here. If there's another option from somebody else about reuse of this building, we're open to that, right?
Well, you're talking about a greenfield now. Like,
If you,
what you're talking about.
Partially.
And one of the things that we discussed before is, you're talking about today, but we're planning for the future too. We don't plan to build a new jail in 10 years, and they say, well, why'd you build it so small? You're not meeting the growth or whatever either. That's been discussed many times, that we're planning for the next 20, 30 years. We don't wanna have to come back and people come back in 5 years and say, well, you built the jail too small, now we gotta build a whole new jail or add to it. We're planning for the future also, which again is difficult to do, but you've got to plan, otherwise you're gonna be right back again, adding on or that way right away. And then what you had originally come up with was the jail, and again, you're basing on the Wolves study that said jail was #1 priority, highway shop was #2 priority. So if you're gonna change the priorities around, that's flipping everything around.
yeah, Terry, I wasn't saying that we're gonna change the priorities. I think we need to go through the exercise, because what I heard, and this was just candid finance committee meeting, right? There's a lot of things that you guys have to spend money on, needs, right? We get that. To your point, Tom, we do get that. We work with all different kind of counties. We understand the budget constraints that are there. But like Kyle said, we have to advise in regards to what does that look like operationally, right? Cause we're gonna get into operational discussion of how do we get there. And then you collectively, that's where the ad hoc is, you're comfortable, as we've turned over every rock, we've looked at all these options, how do we get to that point? So if this is the option you want us to explore, we will dig into that. I mean, I think a tour would be good, floor plans would be good. I think if there's I think you asked a question about something downtown here, if there's something downtown that we could do differently, open to that.
Is there ever a plan of just bare bones, the basics of what we do?
What do you mean by bare bones?
Yeah.
Give me the scope. Are you talking just housing?
Just exactly what we need, nothing more, nothing less.
I think the challenge with that question, John, is that how long are you talking about what that solution would be, right? So, like the bed count, we talked about this number got down to 62 at one point, we were close to 100 and we've scaled that back. So bare bones would be day one, are you moving in with more beds than you needed, right?
Right, but are we looking at adding more beds just so we can house, or are we just looking
No.
at beds just to fulfill our count?
Yeah, and I think that's where we want this buy-in here, because right now, if you looked at what you guys are average, you're below mid-40s, right? But historically, you tipped up in close to 50, right? So is 50 the number? Is 60 the number? That's how we got to have a little bit of a growth factor.
I don't believe we're at mid-40s. You're talking about jail population?
Yeah, I'm talking historically, I think you're in the mid-30s, right?
I thought we were high 30s as an average.
Right now, we're in the mid to upper 30s right
And year by year, it's been fairly constant that way, hasn't it?
now. Yeah, rises and goes a little bit. But again, you also have to remember, as judges come in, DAs come in, that number goes up and down also.
Right.
You know, it's just the way it is. I mean, on what year we shipped out because we were over. We were 56, 57 for a time, and we shipped out. And the numbers came back down. Things change. I mean, I get that. You guys are the ones that's gotta decide what you're gonna do here. But you guys elect a sheriff for this position, to operate the sheriff's department. And I wanna say, I will personally say that for the 12 years, 11 years I've been here as sheriff, I think we have done quite well with the sheriff's department. Other than a couple of years with the issues we have with overtime and stuff, we've been well within our budget. But we've been dealing with these issues, trying to figure out how to fix things as we go. And I'm not saying we're the only ones. Every department has their issues that need to be fixed as we go. But I think our trouble is we haven't fixed things as we went. And I'm gonna use this phrase, as I know everybody hates it, but we've kicked everything down the road.
Well, not we, past.
Well, I'm just saying.
That to me is the correct way to say it, past people.
Okay, so the past has done this, but we're at a point now that there has to be something done, okay? You know, if you wanna build the highway shop first and the jail later, that's on you guys. But I can tell you, the way things are right now, the cost that it's costing us right now to run this jail isn't gonna change anymore. That's the new norm. That's what it's gonna be. And you have to justify spending this levy money to operate this jail because it isn't efficient to run it correctly versus borrowing the money to build this jail. And I'm not saying, I won't be here probably when you break ground, if you decide to do this. So this isn't for me, this is for the community, and this is the best way. Based on the numbers that were projected, is based on the history of the growth of the jail, of the inmates of the jail. Does it go up and down? Absolutely. But like I said, when we first did the study, it had us up in 40 to 50 years at 90 inmates.
Based on what?
Based on the past,
So
the past growth.
that would be something for us to show you next time there was an indication of what your ADP growth rate was, and you do look at a little bit of this based on offices. But you do a growth factor.
Why would we more than double our incarceration rate over that time when our population as a county is flat to decreasing?
But the population of the county isn't a reflection on the population of the jail. We have people in our jail that are not from Rusk County. We have a lot of people, that we deal with, okay? So that, you can't really say, well, our population is going down, so our jail's gonna grow. It isn't. I can tell you that right now, the #1 crime is sexual assaults in Rusk County. We handle several a month. It's terrible, but we have to deal with it, and that's how it is. And where do these people need to go? Do you want them as your neighbor? I don't.
No,
They need to be where they need to be. Does that always happen? It doesn't, I get it. But it's, let's cut this thing to where, what's the point of building it? I mean, that's kind of where I'm at here. This is, in my opinion, Tom had his, and nothing wrong with his opinion, if that's how we needed to go about it. But my opinion is you can't cut everything out of this and make it operational efficiently. You can't take the kitchen out. What's it costing us right now? What's it costing us a month for meals?
16 to 18.
16 to 18,000, when we could be doing it for a third that cost if we had our own kitchen. To me, that's not financially, prudent to do it that way. I mean, but that's the choices that we've made in the past to get rid of the kitchen, to do that, and a lot of it had to do with some people didn't like this or how that was, and that's fine. But we have to take our personal opinions and set them aside and do what's best for the county. You know, if you say, we're not building it, will I be devastated? Probably a little bit, but that's life. We'll move on, we'll figure out how to do it, but it's gonna cost money to do it. And what is financially the best way to spend the county's money to solve this problem? That's how I see it. I don't know, maybe I'm not making sense, maybe I'm just rambling.
Well, I think one of the things that you say that the operating costs keep going up, and operating costs have to come out from the tax levy. However, if you borrow the money to build a physical facility, that can go on the capital improvement project, the borrowing levy. But it's, either one is gonna keep going up. You know, you cannot borrow for operating costs.
You know, and we can start over here and figure out a way to do this correctly. But the longer we wait, the more that cost goes up. And that's what worries me. I pay taxes just like everybody else. And I'm concerned that we just keep waiting and waiting to where that cost is more and more. Is it gonna be an impact on the taxes? Yes, it is. There's just no way around it. Is it gonna be a lot? Yeah, it is. But it's a necessity of the county that it needs to be done.
I think that's the hard part to swallow, is that borrowed amount, you know, 40 million or whatever the figure. Just from everybody, comments, whatever, the public, the board, whatever. Isn't there some way we can put a cap on this thing and say, hey, we got $20 million, $25 million, what can you do for us? Bring us up to code.
I think that's part of what the committee has to give us the directive on. So Tom kinda did that. He said, take 25 million, and we went back and we said we need this to be a 60-bed facility with all the infrastructure, right? If your number is 20 million, Kyle and I will come back and show you, here's what you're gonna get for $20 million, but you're gonna give up this, this, and this.
Right.
And then you can make that decision on what does that look like. And I think the challenging part of the feedback that we got from the community, because we got a lot of feedback, right, is that don't build across the street because it's not a long-range plan. So now if you talk about a long-range plan and we're only gonna do housing, and we park housing somewhere, if we park housing somewhere, support has to be there. If you put just a housing down here, we may be able to reutilize the Sally Port, maybe we'll do some renovation for intake, but now you are tied to this block. So every one of them are gonna have, I'm gonna say, painful decisions to make. And I think that's where we're at, to your bare bones pieces. If the number is 20 coming out of here, if you're telling us it's 20 million, or if you're telling us go check out this other site, or you're saying give us a greenfield site that's a new spot where we wanna move in that direction, that's the guidance we need from you guys. Now, the premise of, I don't know, the hard part is what's the number and what's driving the number, right? So even if you went from 38 million to $25 million, right? You're still gonna have a tax impact, right? So what's driving that number? And I think that's the premise of why did we get to that number and how much are we gonna give up to get to that number? And I think that's where we're at.
And to that point, I think it is safe to say the 38 million option, which was driven by the prior ad hoc committee's direction, that give us 25 million, that 38 million reflects the bare bones of bed count, I think, and I'm looking at Kurt for an affirmational, I'm gonna check one.
Bed count at the 70, right?
Bed count at the 70.
I'm getting a vibe, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that, I'm getting a
And-
vibe that 70 could be challenged. I
And
think
all
that's where I'm at.
support services that would go with that, so that's visitation, that's laundry, that's kitchen, that includes Huber. You might say, nope, we're gonna just cut ties, not even go with Huber or anything like that. That had the 8 receiving cells.
Yep.
This is really the minimum, excuse me, the minimum programmatic requirements for an operational jail. No law enforcement is 38 million. Anything below that cost will be conscious decision-making of, we are taking this out and we know we're not going to have a kitchen out there, or we're not going to have a sally port, or we're not having staff lockers, or we're not having a medical office. It's just an exam room, that's it. And those are the really tough decisions, so that like.
But I think from the premise of what John is saying, if they told us today, the next line item is, find us something for $20 million, we would come back and say, here's all you're getting.
This is what it's going to be.
Here's all you're getting for $20 million.
And this
It
is
does
what's
not
pulled
meet your
out.
program. Your program is out the door then, right?
Yep.
But this is what you get. And then the other option would be, if you want us to go over there and look at what could we do in that space for sheriffs and courts, and the question is, could you park a jail out there? That can absolutely be done.
Yeah.
And bring it back to you for a deliverable, so that you can evaluate them. And then, I hate to say it, but the decision-making will come back to you guys. That's part of why you're on the ad hoc, to say, is 20 million giving up that much, does that make sense? And then there's gonna be the back and forth. It's kind of what we did before, but I think it's revisiting with some other options. Can I ask what the building is? Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, we look at that.
Yeah.
And then, I hate to say this, but hopefully, in November, we're gonna have a change of administration. Personally, I'm kind of tired of having a vegetable in the highest office of the land, but, maybe things will turn around fiscally.
What's our directive to them? I mean, in my opinion, you probably don't really wanna ask me. I'm just gonna sit along the sidelines because I have nothing to say.
Well, I think not only are we tasked here with making a good decision, we've gotta make a good decision that we can take to our constituents and the rest of the board. We've gotta, whatever decision we come to here, we've gotta be convinced it's the best decision. And we need to be able to tell the county in good faith that that is a good decision and have them believe us. So it may be fruitless, at least in your mind, you two fellas, as far as saying, looking at what 25 million will do for us, what 20 million would do. But what I'd like to see is what it would. And then so here's what 20 million will get you.
Yeah.
All right, here's this box. And this is what 25 will do, and you flip the page and that's what you got. And here's what 30 does.
So from a priority, just so we know from the priority, and I don't think it's fruitless, I think it's an exercise we need to go through, based on the feedback that we got from your community. It's taking a directive from your taxpayers, fully supported. But when we're talking about the priorities, I would say that hearing that the priority would be housing. And support would come
And we
secondary.
need safety for our staff. I think those should be the two.
with the understanding that
From
we
the
can,
greenest guy on the board, on the committee, but
Well, okay, in my opinion, we need to start over, right down to square one. Keep this number under control. We're gonna throw out what Ryan's kinda throwing at you now, in my opinion, is that correct?
Yeah. Fine.
And if we come back to the drawing board and we can't seem to get on the same page, I don't know what we're doing then.
understood.
I mean, we're wasting each other's time. So,
Got it.
at that point in time, upon the next meeting, if we can't come to agreement based on what's laid out, we might as well cut ties and move down the road. Instead of wasting everybody's time, coming to these meetings, kicking the same can, and not getting where we need to be.
I agree.
So, that's my take, and
So-
that's how it's.
So what's your number? So what's the number? Is it 20, 25?
Exactly what he said, lay it out like that, so we have some idea of where we're going with this and what we have to play with. Right now, you're showing us these big buildings that look great and everything, but we don't have no base plan. We wanna see the base plan of just the bottom line here first. And from that point, we'll either go this way, or we go this way, or we both go this way. I mean, that's
Can
kinda.
I ask a question? Where did the 20 or $25 million number come from?
That was thrown out in the beginning.
But where did it come from? Where did we come up with that number? That number came from Lowell. That was the number they said we could build this for 20 or 25 million.
28.
28 million,
You did
okay.
say 28.
So, but here's the deal, Wold only showed us a picture with a box. It never showed us a jail housing unit, it never showed all the support stuff, that was never, ever said what it would look like, what it would be, it's, we could build this for 28 million. And I would remember saying very clearly to you, if they will build it for 28 million, sign the contract today. And they said, that's move-in, ready to go. Turnkey, ready to go, 28 million. I said, sign the contract, because you can't build it for that. Because we know what it costs, we know what the other jails that were built were paying. Dunn County, not Dunn County, St. Croix County is gonna add just a housing pod. And they're looking at $60 million just for the pod right now. It's probably a little bigger than what we're asking for a pod, but that's the price. And he showed you a part of leaving this open for future renovation, okay? Because we wanna add 11 more cells. What is that 11 cells gonna cost you in 10 years more than it's gonna cost you today? Ask Eau Claire County. When they built new, they left the pod empty because they really didn't need that space at the moment. It cost them 3 times as much to finish that pod as when they originally, and the pod was already there, they just had to finish it. It was terrible. And I'm just concerned that, I get the bare bones. We don't need anything fancy, we don't need anything extra. I don't think we've asked for that. But I'm concerned as this 20 or 25 or $28 million price tag that we got from somebody who never provided us with all the information that we needed. That's my concern, and that's why I guess I'm upset with, we're upset with the price of it. But it's frustrating to me that we're stuck on this number because somebody threw it out. Well, yeah, I like the $20 million better than the $40 million, who wouldn't? But you have, it's not a realistic number, and that's in my opinion. In my opinion.
and that's why we're asking for
in
it,
defense
though,
of-
so that we know why, Jeff.
Okay, in defense of Wald and the study, just so we're clear, the numbers went like this since then. So 2 calendar years have
Right.
passed. So the number, we're gonna get less building than what they talked about there, cause that's just what happened with the market. That everybody is impacted by that. But I think what they're talking about is, here's the message that we got from our taxpayers. We have this budget, this limit, what can we get for it? And we're gonna take program off the table, meaning that we're not gonna use the program as the sizes. We're gonna give you what you're going to get for that amount of money, and it's gonna be parked on this block, so it's gonna be somewhere on this block, so we have to figure out what that does with parking, all those sorts of things. Unless you want it across the street with no skywalk, you could show it detached if you want to, or it'll have to end up being somewhere here on the building, or on the lot, so.
Well, I think that's a good idea, a good place to start, you know, with the 20 million or whatever that figure is.
We'll start with 20
Go
and
bare
then,
bones and see what you can do with this building, this lot, and bring it up to code. Can you do it for that amount, or can you do a little more than that for that amount?
sure, absolutely.
I think that's what we're looking for starters.
Sounds good to us.
Is that, that's directive of the, that's directive of the committee center about? That's your understanding?
Well, are they gonna look at the green site?
We can look at
Medical.
your option as well, if you want to. You can look at them both.
Yeah, no reason, no harm in looking.
Okay.
Okay? We don't need a motion, we just discuss it. Okay. Alright then, let's see where that goes from there. Any announcements? Not that I have. That's meeting day?
So if we're gonna look at two options, could we look at meeting after Labor Day, cause we're gonna need some time on that, like the week of September 16th?
Yeah.
Does that work? Wednesday seemed to be a good day last time we were meeting, does that work for everybody?
It's usually. Yeah.
Highway in the morning,
On Wednesday?
September 16th, what's
No,
that?
18th to 1 o'clock.
I'm sorry. Nothing
18th to
on that
1
day.
PM. Sure, or.
Ryan, does that work for you, or would you like it later?
I'll make it work. What day is
We
that?
go later if it,
I really don't like it, but
What time you, what time you
What
up?
time?
three is way better for me.
Alright.
3 o'clock it
Is
is.
that okay?
I don't like 3, but I'll go.
I won't go through then, I've got another meeting from 3 to 7 on the 18th.
And that,
That's County Community Foundation.
Back it up to one then.
Run on ink, guys.
Well, as far as I know.
No, I didn't.
Whatever works for everybody.
So
We'll
one,
make it work.
Alright. 1 o'clock, right? Thank you all, appreciate it. Yep, absolutely.
thank you.
thanks, Kurt.
Yep. We'll have to schedule a tour of the building, so I'm assuming you can get us in there?
Yep.
Okay, if there's anything else, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So